Well, here's what's going on in the province of Pirek, the main defense structure. A servant came into the room with the most delicious food at that moment. It was lunch for Callian, but the knight was a little short on words and asked to leave it on the table. Apparently all because Mr. Ian was still unconscious, the courtly young man surmised. After all, it had been several days since his transformation. Thanks to the magic, the mage's energy consumption and life force consumption have been reduced. Even the knight himself can see that he is slowly coming to his senses. Thinking about their own things, no one notices how the Archmage's hand begins to show clear signs of life. I remember Paige asking that if there was a problem, you could send some mana to his head, and it seemed like a good time to call the local mage. The warrior thought so, but a quiet voice distracted him from that idea. Ian came to his senses and asked not to call anyone. There was no need for more of this. At this moment the knight felt great relief and joy for his guest. The Archmage, of course, was also glad to see him well. The first thing Callian did was to worry and inquire about the young man's well-being, which was obviously not yet stable. Yuyan's head was cracking, his stomach ached, and he couldn't move. I should probably call a doctor immediately, the knight frantically muttered. But no, the mage stopped, he was just hungry. It happens to people if you don't eat anything for a few days. The condition gradually worsens, and you lose control of your body. Who'd have thought it? The next morning at the outskirts of Pirek's province, the Archmage was already on his feet in his usual attire, as if nothing had happened. Perhaps he wishes to stay at least one more night? Callian realizes that he is busy, but they would not like to say goodbye to Ian properly with a dinner. Paige found the idea too welcome. He wasn't some benefactor, but a simple Archmage of the tower. Anyone else in his place would have done the same favors he did. But here, Callian personally didn't think so. Another mage in Ian's place would have simply slayed the monsters and returned to the tower. The knight wanted to be honest. At first he doubted Paige's skills. He thought the young mage was unable to help them solve the problem with the monster raids. But he was wrong. In just 10 days Ian did it, something the Lord's men had been struggling with for a very long time. The mage from the north definitely has a special power that no one else has. Anyway, Callian then suggests another plan, which confuses the Archmage slightly. Apparently, the latter has no clue. The knight had heard that 5 years ago, and had obtained the status of a military dignitary in Morgan province. So why don't they do the same here? Formalities can be omitted, the mage doesn't have to worry about that. Anyway, Callian proposes to Ian and Paige to officially become an honored guest of the Pirek province. It's not an easy thank you, they have a clear reason. In the knight's opinion, even a 6th-class Archmage can be pleased with such an attitude. It was beneficial for both him and the Pirek province, after all. Ianjo, for his part, didn't even think it was possible to make such official and important statements of the imperial level so easily. But if Callian felt that way, he saw no reason to refuse. The knight rejoiced upon hearing this. Then the only thing left to do is to solidify their contract. That's how they settle for 1,000 years. It will be over quickly. The mage doesn't have to worry about anything. And at that moment, Callian's sword touched the ground. From this day forward, the Pirek family will be ready to receive Archmage Ian Paige at any time. Should he require their assistance, they are always ready to give it. The knight swears on his name that this vow will be passed down from generation to generation. Perhaps this formality had always bored Callian. If only they could just say, the contract is done, congratulations. In any case, the Archmage thanked for such an honor in his direction. And lastly, the Lord asks Ian to notify them in advance of his arrival, so that they can show him all their hospitality. Paige will certainly do so at the first opportunity. But now it's time for him to leave. It was time for him to leave, because without a second's hesitation, the magician took to the sky. From this height, the mountains and rocks seemed no bigger than insects to the mage. He thought about how much had happened in the past few days. Ian had really accomplished a lot with his actions. He had even found a staff containing black magic that had been missing for more than 300 years. Back in the capital, Paige would have to work hard to revive it. The girl in her smart dress came down the stairs quickly. The first thing she shouted when she saw the familiar silhouette was Ian's name. The young man immediately recognized that pleasant voice. His mother, Vanessa, was there, and he was very happy to see her. But the girl, like any mother, began with accusations. And how could Patch just pick up and vaporize into thin air like that? Does he realize how upset she was? My God, he's gone too, the mother remarked anxiously. All skin and bones, couldn't the people in Pirek feed him well for such help? It saddened her to think how much her son had suffered. A lot has happened, the humiliated son reported. But he is sure he will soon regain all his former weight. By the way, he has something for his mother. And the Archmage ran his hand into his breast pocket. It's a magical orb that uses mana to communicate. Paige had asked the workshop to make it so that when he wasn't around, Mother could always contact him. There's also a second one just like it in his staff, and apologizes again for making him worry. He'll try to be there for her from now on. But suddenly the tipsy conversation is interrupted by a voice. The young alchemist is so curious to know what kind of magic it was. He studies many different things at the academy, but this is the first time he's seen such a thing. How did the mage manage to be both with them in the capital and in Demidor? Must be an illusion? A mirroring? Or something like that? Even an archmage finds it hard to cope with such a sudden onslaught and number of questions. How to explain it in a simple way too. He had risen to the 6th class, so he had access to such spells now. The boy was just thrilled. So Paige is the most powerful mage in the Empire? Even the tomboy's father was stunned. He knew, of course, from their first meeting, that the boy was powerful, that much. The archmage politely and accommodatingly asked him not to give it a second thought. Nothing had changed. Let them continue to treat him as before. And the boy wanted to experiment with new elixirs tonight. Perhaps Ian would keep him company. But alas, the mage declined his offer. The thing is, he was invited somewhere. It's suspiciously crowded, and their faces are either funny or silly. Had Paige come to the right place? There he was, the heir exclaimed happily, inviting the wizard to the table. He must have guessed that today they were having a banquet in his honor. This news frightened Ian a little. He'd come in plain clothes, so what kind of banquet would it be? There they were. The knights were kind enough to call Paige to them. We found a place for him and ordered appetizers. And the centerpiece of the evening is here. The Crown Prince congratulates the wizard on his behalf on reaching the 6th grade. For this occasion, they've brought special drinks from the Imperial stockpile. The finest and the choicest, the kind you can't get anywhere else. And now they all want a drink, but Ian's face continued to remain fearful. He had hardly touched alcohol in his previous life. Ragnar was against it. He said alcohol clouded the mind. What about this one? The mage thought hard. Then, abruptly, his mouth tasted the elixir of pleasure. That's when the Crown Prince wondered what it felt like. Ian began rubbing his mouth with his hand. It was quite good, just as His Highness had thought. The other tavern guests were also curious about what Demidor was like. Perhaps the Crown Prince would share a story? To which the latter, of course, agreed. He doesn't have to be a man of his word. And it all started, and then the unheard of popularity came upon Ian out of the blue. Suddenly, from outside, a courteous voice invited the wizard to fill his mug. Oh, I think it was Sir Oliver. Patch could be calm, if only for a little while. The knight warned the young man that the drink was strong, so he should be careful. If Iana drinks it, the whole knight's troop may disappear somewhere at the command of his magic. But the archmage reassured a concerned Oliver, and Paige had no idea that the Crown Prince was so at ease with other knights. Was that even in the order of things? Then the captain explained that everyone present had long ago sworn allegiance to His Highness. They are loyal to each other, so it's all good. An oath of trust. Then Johan wondered. Oliver's hunch was confirmed, just as he thought. Now the knight understood why the mage had no friends. Although he had known about it since the first meeting. Paige needs to remember their conversation from 5 years ago in Morrigan when he caught the spy Cecilia. At that age, Ian was already a 3rd-class mage, and he had neutralized a dangerous criminal. But you could tell from the boy's look that he didn't care at all, that he was perfectly in control of his emotions, and his peers were not yet so adept at social behavior. Paige's face was expressionless, as if he were a knight who'd been trained for years. So Oliver noticed, too, Ian thought to himself. Then the captain realized that at such a young age, the boy already had a lot of secrets. Even if he tried, he could hardly make friends. The man sees right through people. The archmage surrendered under the influence of the sweet alcoholic beverage. It was all true, though hearing it directly was a bit bitter. To be fair, Paige had one friend, but the end of their friendship hadn't been pleasant. Oliver wondered what kind of man he'd been. And here was something else he'd realized in the 5 years they'd been together. When he talked to Ian, the captain felt as if he were talking to a grown man. It's funny, the mage added and reached for his mug. To be fair, he's 48 years old now, and he keeps his youth by magic. He's kidding, of course he's kidding. Knight said himself that Paige doesn't get along well with people. He still hasn't learned how to joke, so the generous captain forgives the young man, and Ian graciously thanks him for it. Only the stars and the light in the windows illuminated the street. What time is it anyway? Ian seems to have had too much to drink. He'd never drunk so much in his previous life. He also heard a familiar voice, which meant he wasn't imagining it. The vice captain? But what was he doing here and with a face like that? According to the young man, he'd been drinking and had gone out to get some air. Just like Ian. He wasn't used to evenings like this. The vice captain of the knights is Paul Rance, and in a previous life, he was the most skilled knight since Oliver. Although he is of simple origin, but he is loyal to the crown and his country, so he became one of the crown prince's and captain's retainers. The young man was curious about the magician's drinking alcohol for the first time and what it tasted like. Unexpectedly, even for himself, Ian answered that it was pleasant, and he didn't mind spending evenings like this from time to time. Paul was genuinely pleased by this. The deputy captain was very grateful for the mage's help, as were the knights who were still talking about it. Even His Highness hadn't been seen this happy in a long time. It was all because of Ian. The warm words flattered Paige, but really he was only pushing everyone in the back and they all moved forward together. But the fact that the prince is happy, the magician will take that as a compliment. Paul Rance had never seen such a thing before. Ian's voice disturbed his thoughts. It turned out that the young man had never seen the mage smile like that before. Suddenly there was a noise, and the door to the tavern opened again. It was a knight frantically looking for a deputy. His Highness is calling the young man to him. If he continues to shirk drinking, he will demote him. There was no way Paul could have expected such a turn. He'd better go. That was the end of their brief dialogue with Ian. The young knight should be stronger this time, and His Highness would definitely pour more. The mage added one last time, smiling. This was the moment for solitude. What could be better in this weather than a little walk? Now Paige's memories of his past life, they no longer lay heavy on his shoulders. The choices he made and the changes they brought, they are completely different from what they were before. No longer can Ian know where his decisions will lead him. His goal is simple, to protect the people he cares about and live a happy heart. The game starts right now. Ragnar should be ready. The fifth crown prince's castle. He is apparently very unhappy about something, because he is waiting for an explanation of what their plan is this time. Doesn't the Tower Master remember how Ragnar asked him to get rid of Ian before he became a nuisance? And now what? The old man made no excuses and agreed, but it didn't save him from the prince's wrath. The High Magician asked him to wait, promising to remove Paige, and where did that get him? What's he doing now? Ian is their biggest obstacle in this situation. The Tower Master admitted his mistake. He only wanted to resolve things faster, but even so, they were too late. Who could have known that the mole was so cunning? The High Mage is no longer willing to make excuses, but for the last time, the fifth crown prince is curious. For the last time, the mage asks the young man to wait, because now they are ready. Let Helen introduce herself. That name, is it familiar to the prince? The same archmage who had been hiding for so many years, but the reality was a little worse. The girl lifted her hood and said hello. Her red eyes contrasted perfectly with her equally red hair. His Highness was horrified and dazedly took a few steps back. The Tower Master hurriedly reassured him. The girl was just a novice following orders. She would do anything for the prince. Now His Highness realized what he was up against, and the old man only confirmed his hunch. Helen is the forbidden black magician. Ian Page will soon fall at the young man's feet. Tom needn't worry about him. Everything will be just as he planned. The Crown Prince's place will be his. The top floor of the Ivory Tower. Now the High Magician is also aware of it. 6th grade. This news didn't bode well. The Tower Master was out of his mind. A magical aura covered his entire body. The leaves that were lying on the table turned into glass and shattered at the slightest contact with an obstacle. How dare this little guy? But his ardor was cooled by a sudden visitor. It seemed that the young man had heard his name called. No sooner had he entered the threshold than he was shocked by the general chaos. Could it be that something had happened in the Master Tower? But the old man's cheerful face said otherwise. And in general, there was nothing to talk about. The High Magician remembered the first time he had seen the young man. 20 years had passed since then. He had been a baby, an abandoned child wrapped in a piece of cloth who tossed and turned and reached for the mage with his hands. The Tower Master would never forget the joy he felt when he saw him. Who could have known that the child would not only be capable of magic, but would also become an official mage? How could you imagine such a thing? The old man was as proud of him as a father is of his son. The young man was pleased. The Tower Master's wisdom had made all this possible for him. To repay at least the honor of his grace, he would do anything. And the old man had a favor to ask of the young man. If he was not busy, let him come to his house tonight. The boy did not ask anything and bowed with a promise to come. Now the master of the tower would be waiting for him there. It was evening outside, but the lights were still on nowhere. As the door opened quietly, the kindly bartender greeted him, and then the face changed in an instant. Was this, what, the Archmage of the Ivory Tower himself, Ian Page? The mage was surprised by this, even the hood he was wearing then. But the man behind the counter explained everything cordially. There is no one in their establishment who has not heard of the Archmage. He was honored that he had come to such an inconspicuous place, but there was cause for alarm. What had Ian come to them for? The mage reassured the man, placing the pouch of coins on the table. It's simple, he wants information, and he's willing to buy it. Now the bartender sees, it is not fairy tales after all, but that the mages of the tower generously pay for their requests. For his sake, the man is willing to share the information, which was great, because Ian is interested in any information concerning black mages. The bartender was surprised at first. Shouldn't he know more about them himself? Then the archmage clarified that his information was superficial and he was looking for something else. The information could be anything, but Paige wanted to know what most people didn't know. Now the man seemed to understand him, waving his arms happily to the sides. The mage was very lucky, because they had been paying special attention to this problem recently. Does Mr. Ian know something about the Order of Dragons? Paige began to remember what he knew about it. It's one of the religious communities of the Empire. They worship dragons as gods. It's not particularly popular or widespread, but it's been around for centuries. The story of the Order began with a small group of village believers. One tomb raider proclaimed himself the sole descendant of dragons, and then began to convince others that he possessed special powers. Many did not believe the criminal's words, but over time the small religious group began to grow. Now it is shrouded in mystery, and no one knows who is in charge, how many followers there are, or what their purpose is. Ignorance has spawned many rumors, and even talk of them being able to bring the dead back to life. The man doesn't know for sure if it's true that dragon followers exist, but one thing is clear from all the information and rumors, there is definitely a connection between the Order of Dragons and black magic. They also believe that some of the top members of the Empire are close to the Order. Black magic requires more than just mana and not just human resources. Hence, there are powers that can get them. Since the community is closed, it's hard to know how to get in, and it's not easy to determine who is a member of the Order. However, if they really can control people, is it hard to brainwash someone from above to achieve their own goals? That's all the man can tell us right now. They will continue their search, and if they dig up anything, the bartender will definitely send a letter to the archmage. Ian was happy with that outcome. He hoped their investigation would be successful. The bartender waved goodbye and thanked Paige for his payment. Around midnight of the Archmage Tower's resting place. This question really puzzled the young man. Order of the Dragon. I haven't heard this name in my past life, but how is that possible? That one is several hundred years old after all. The Shaman King is the first clue to that. Conducted black magic through a staff that had black symbols engraved on it. If black magic requires more than just mana, the question remains open and complicated. Paige can't say for sure, but it's likely that the Tower Master knows about the connection between the Great Meadows and black magic. Perhaps he himself has something to do with the Order of Dragons. Things have changed too much compared to the Archmage's past life, and it's not because of Ian's return. The world has always been like this. The difference is too great and continues to grow. Could it be because of the use of the dragon language? Or maybe this is a side effect of going back in time. Either way, Paige felt like he'd opened a chest that shouldn't have been opened. Going forward, having memories of a past life was easy. But right now, the mage knew nothing, and about this one in particular. He would need to be prepared for anything. The Tower Master apologized to Mark for calling him so late. However, it didn't bother him in the least. So what did the High Magician want to talk to him about? The old man only snapped his fingers silently. At the same moment, the door behind him locked. We can't let others know about this, the Tower Master clarified. His question was this. The youngster would follow him. The mage, in turn, tried to tactfully ask where exactly. At that moment, the old man's hand touched a book with a burgundy cover. It would show them the way. When he turned the pages, they shone with the dark and deep colors of the raging ocean. A moment later, a magical portal formed in the middle of the room. The idea began to confuse Mark more and more, but the kind host of the tower insisted. His will was definitely not to be resisted. The young man went together with the high mage into the portal. It was dark and unnaturally quiet inside until the Tower Master used a spell. It was incredibly bright, blinding his companion. But then the light dissipated, and something indescribable came into view. A terribly gloomy room that at first glance looked like a prison. People. Behind the solid metal bars were haggard men. It looked as if they were about to fall off their skates. When the old man saw the young man's frightened face, he asked him not to be so frightened. Everyone here is just an ingredient. But Marco couldn't help himself and shouted in indignation. What is the Tower Master talking about? People? Ingredients? That's when the mage noticed a familiar face. Corius. He was missing his right arm. He almost died while practicing magic, the old man finished. Like almost everyone else here, they would die while working by accident or illness. Sometimes mages are brought to them from other states, and non-mages are just brought in off the streets. They would still end up horribly and have wasted their lives. Non-mages are pretty much the same, creatures incapable of even getting a first class. Other mages would have destroyed them with their indifference or something worse. The Tower Master saved them from disgrace. And before Marco could say a word, the old man repeated himself, not just ingredients that could still serve the ivory tower. And then he raised the staff high above his head, and a bloody scarlet aura began to ooze from it. The young man need not worry, their fate will not befall him. The Tower Master promises. Mark is almost like a son to him. The staff struck the ground with a deafening thud that echoed throughout the hall. At the same moment, the aura wrapped around the young man's body, and then began to penetrate deep inside. The mage held on as best he could, coughing constantly, but in a moment his strength ran out, and Mark fell to his knee. He stood before his powerful master. "Let him stand," the Tower Master said, and the mage obeyed unquestioningly. Nothing even seems to have changed. "Who is he?" The old man asked a question, to which the young man replied, "The master of the Green River Empire's magic tower, Mr. Havert Leon. And he is Marka, the second-class mage of the Ivory Tower. From now on, his personal assistant and servant." The old man threw his blade at the young man's feet. Could he cut off his little finger with this dagger? The mage silently held it up to his hand, and then in a swift motion, he took off his finger. Now Havert can call him his son. At the same time, the magic tower is carrying out its service in the usual mode. But one thing that surprises everyone is that the tower's master has taken an indefinite vacation. Of course, he has a lot of things to do, and he's not the same age anymore. Or maybe it's because of Mr. Ian, the young man suggested. He was the youngest archmage who had already received the 6th grade. Surely that must have hurt the dignity of the steward. Still, what would happen now? A question that interested all the servants. The Tower Master is on the side of the 5th prince, and Mr. Ian is for the counterprince. You can't have the two main men of the tower on opposite sides of the barricades. And who should they be for? A voice from outside intervened. Like they have a choice. Whoever is taller will give the orders. The mage didn't utter another word and walked onward, all the way to the archmage's room. Ian kindly invites him in. "Mark, Paige is glad to see him again." The young man brought what the man had asked for. Perhaps the Archimagus had been looking for these books for a long time. They would be of great help to him. "What of the Tower Master?" the man inquired. Could he be ill? Marco reassured the mage then, informing him that nothing serious was going on. Admittedly, his hand spoke otherwise, and Annetta remarked, "Ah, yes, just an injury while exercising," the young man replied. The archmage smiled politely and wished him a speedy recovery. "But something's not right here. Paige can sense it. It's like he's a different person. Marco used to behave more freely with him. He has the same face and voice, but he's clearly building a wall between them. It's just after the Tower Master took a vacation." And then Ian remembered something. He and the young man had first met 6 years ago in Morgan Province. But if it hadn't been for Mark's help during the battle with the goblins, there would have been a big disaster. Mac agreed with the elder's words. Paige's hands trembled with inner indignation. Before the young man could leave, the Archimage stopped him, then rose from his chair. Mark wasn't in the battle with the goblins. He had helped Ian during the mana test. Then the mage apologized for being a little remiss. But that wouldn't stop Paige anymore. He grabbed his staff and pointed it towards the young man, casting one of the spells aloud. "Greater Abolition," his words read. At the same moment, a magic circle with hieroglyphics formed in the middle of the room, and all its light was directed towards Mark, blinding the young man. Dark energy oozed from the mage's eyes and then all over his body, causing him to fall to the ground. And finally, the same unbearable coughing. Thank goodness it was over. Ian's first concern was to see if Mark was all right, but he had no idea what was going on. The young man's mad eyes said it better than any words could. The Archmage did not hide it and explained in detail. He had been affected by dark magic, but Paige had only used a counterspell. Then, barely catching his breath, Mark spoke. They need to stop him. The Tower Master. And he asked, let the mage tell them what happened. Absolutely everything. Let him say everything he knows. The day in the city was nearing evening. A guest arrived at the Tower Master's house. It was Mr. and Paige. The servant added that he had come alone. Then let him come in, Havert Leon asked in a calm tone. He was hooked. The old man had cast a spell of black magic on Mark on purpose. A magician like Ian would easily recognize it. Now it's done. Let the Tower Master run out of ingredients, but it was worth it. It was necessary to get a 6th grade mage. Especially since there would always be new ingredients. The door to the hall slowly opened. The Supreme Mage had not expected his visit. A 6th class Archmage with a person of his own. The Tower Master is honored. Ian started the conversation right away. He said that he had learned that the Tower Master was ill. So, of course, he had come to pay his respects to the elder. After exchanging flattering pleasantries, the Tower Master invited the Archmage to sit down. The long silence was ended by the old man's words. Mr. Marco isn't feeling well, he may have infected him. It was true, it did not seem so to Ian. The Tower Master was glad to hear this, for he had always been so worried about the young man's health. But the Archmage heard an incredible story from Marco, that Havert had a secret laboratory in the manor, where he was conducting inhuman experiments with black magic. The old man laughed at these words. Marco was delirious, that's impossible. Delirious, as if a spell of black magic had been cast on him, Ian continued, not taking his eyes off the Tower Master. And as if the one who had cast it was he, Havert Leon. The man Marco considered his father. The young man pleaded for him to stop. The old man continued to refuse. He does have a portal to the lab. It's created by an artifact that he got by accident. It's just convenient. However, a laboratory with black magic is nonsense. If Ian wants to, he can go with him to see it. If he didn't trust the Tower Master, he could go with him and see it for himself. Paige didn't mind, but only if Havert allowed it. Havert paused and invited him to follow him. As the head of the Ivory Tower, he couldn't allow rumors about the use of black magic to spread. The High Magician walked over to the tall red curtain, then peered behind it as if for the first time. This was the portal in question. This is the power of the Havert artifact. If you apply the magic from this book, anyone will be able to use the movement magic that is available to the 8th grade. Ian listened attentively but also warily. But the Tower Master did not speak for long and invited the Archmage to follow him. The same darkness haunted the guest. In his past life, Ian Havert Lien had been considered one of the best masters of the Ivory Tower, a great Archmage who had begun the unification of the continents. An honest and dedicated man. He led Ragnar to the imperial throne and was able to greatly increase Ivory Tower's influence over the country. Since Paige was also on Ragnar's side, he consequently respected and honored the Tower Master as well. Havert turned to Ian, and he too had once wished to be a hero. He had wanted to save the Empire with his own strength. He wanted to help the poor and suffering, but in time he realized something. You can't change everything on your own. And the power that could make the Tower Master a hero was not what he had imagined. Dark magic began to ooze from the old man's staff. Wrapping more and more of his bonds around Ian's body, the hero grabbed his throat. A power that would cause many mages to act under Havert. That he would save this empire from decline. This power is called power. And the 6th class Archmage will definitely be a part of it as well. Under the guidance of the Tower Master, Paige will help this country and its people. A young man like Ian, and an old man like him, that's what it takes to be a hero. Isn't that right? The Archmage bowed to his lord, obediently awaiting his command. Havert ordered him to rise immediately, and he obeyed. He looked soulless, as befitted anyone who had undergone such a rite. The Tower Master gloated unbelievably. It had been so easy, so insanely easy. Well, let the Archmage answer who he is. The Master of the Ivory Tower, Havert Leon, Paige answered concentratedly. And the young man's voice also changed to his usual, utter lunacy. And he smiled before his fist headed for the High Mage's face, and then knocked the old man off balance, throwing him several meters back against the wall. Havert couldn't believe what had happened. This is impossible, he repeated, covering his mouth with his hand. The Archmage turned to the Master of the Tower. Didn't he say that he didn't possess black magic? Since he hasn't surpassed the 5th grade, he doesn't know, but their powers are different. Even using dark magic, 5th grade is still 5th grade. And the old man really thought Ian would come to him unprepared. Such stupid mistakes are not typical of a Tower Master. He shouldn't have rushed now. Havert wanted to say something, but the Archmage's hand stopped him. Mana drain, said Paige, using the spell. Yes, the effect is not the most pleasant, but such is the necessity, Ian finished, removing his hand. Let the old man rest. He won't be able to move at first because of the mana drain. And age takes its toll. It will take a long time to recover, the young man said with a smile. The bastard, how dare he? It was barely audible behind him. Ian cast a light spell, and the first thing he came across was a treasure trove. Chests full of gold coins, gems and luxury items. A humble and decent Tower Master. Funny, the Archmage wondered, why would a man who had nowhere to spend so much treasure? Apparently, the tower owner just liked to collect wealth all his life and not think about sharing it with the Empire. Did he really expect to take them with him to the other world? There was no answer to the accusation. Not far from that place, Ian also noticed the bars the mage had described. They were full of skinny hostages inside. The men were in a terrible state, but some were still breathing. We have to wait a little longer. Paige will definitely help them escape from there and get proper treatment. Havert behind the Archmage gathered his strength and spoke. Ian thinks Marka is the only one like that, but a heavy cough overcame and interrupted the old man. He's got a lot of minions everywhere, and there are guys a lot better than that Ian guy, so... Paige listened intently, so he repeated Leon's words. The Tower Master was angry and shouted for the Archmage not to pretend. The minions were probably already heading towards them and would never stop without Havert's signal. The old man had originally wanted them to focus on two things, Ian's family and the attack on the prince. The hero guessed. The Tower Master offers a deal, and the terms are simple. They will forget what happened here today, especially since the Archmage has no evidence except that portal. And they'll believe Havert over Paige if he dares to tell them. Ian might not realize the consequences of his actions yet, but he'd better not cross the line with the Tower Master. He has no idea how much he will regret it. The young man was tired of listening, and he didn't need to, because he refused. This is something the dazed old man didn't expect to hear. He would deal with the mother of Ian Ikran the prince, but the Archimage did not fall for the cheap provocation. Let him try. The time was nearing midnight. Lady Paige sat alone on the balcony with her arms folded across her legs. She should go inside. A man's voice intervened. The wind is cold today. You could easily catch cold in it. But that's not what worries the woman. Her son Ian has still not returned. And for some reason, even through the orb, she can't contact him. Especially since he always warned her if he was late. The alchemist tried to reassure the lady, assuring her that everything would be fine. Paige is a 6th-class Archmage respected throughout the Empire. Even the worst scoundrels would throw themselves at his feet and beg for forgiveness. So the girl should not even worry. But she couldn't stand the emotion and cried out in her girlish voice. And he is still a boy to her. The man fell silent in surprise. But then he politely said, "I beg your pardon," and bowed to the lady. He has a child himself, but he tried to downplay his mother's feelings. He should apologize again. Lady Paige is always thinking about the burden Ian is carrying. He doesn't rely on anyone else, but goes forward confidently on his own. How sorry she is that he has to suffer so much. She wishes she could share this burden with her son, and it angers her that all she has to do is wait for him in the palace. But the alchemist thinks otherwise. A lady shouldn't say that. The reason why Ian was able to reach such heights is because of his family. The alchemist had mana poisoning and only survived because of his son. That's what family is for. You can't turn your back on her, and even if she turns her back on you. This wise phrase surprised the girl. In any case, the girl thinks that she is useless, but always gives her interlocutor a sense of inner peace. And always nearby, she can always be returned to. That's what has made Ian the man he is. If a lady wants, a man can stay by her side until her son comes home. The girl's silent, good-natured look spoke for itself. The sky is clear and quiet tonight, and the moon is beautiful. Lady Paige noticed it too. Usually there were a lot of guards here, but today for some reason. Suddenly the man jumped up unnaturally abruptly from his chair, a change in his face. They need to get inside right away. He sensed something was wrong. And an extraneous noise came from the bushes. Now they were both quite alarmed. Someone's distinct footsteps appeared not far away, a pair of men in robes. "They must stop immediately," shouted a man from the balcony. But it didn't seem to work. But after all, if those overstepped the line, then... The alchemist quickly reached for Lady Paige in time to grab her and lay her on the ground. Right at that moment, a hail of lightning filled the palace grounds. A rumble of thunder rumbled throughout the outskirts. The crown prince noticed it too. It's not a natural occurrence around here. Oliver suggests we go back to the palace. His Highness doesn't appreciate the idea, though he's too young to understand the army's instincts. The more so, the young man has had such a hard time getting his father's permission to leave the palace and secretly observe the lives of ordinary people. He can't just go back like that, can he? He also had one question for the captain. And how would you like to get started? His Highness wants to learn swordsmanship. And why is it so hard for him to talk about it? It's because he wants to know the most basic things. How hard can it be? At least a stance of some sort? Learning how to coolly unsheath a sword, and Oliver drew his blade in a heartbeat. But not right away. The young man reassured him. But it was about something else. The captain asked the heirs to stand behind him. A second squad of Imperial Knights to defend His Majesty. The prince seemed to be the only one who didn't understand what was going on here. "Let him show himself," Oliver ordered loudly, peering ahead. The knight noticed the robe first, followed by a familiar silhouette. "That's the Archmage of Ivory Tower, Helen." The man thought she had disappeared somewhere a couple years ago. "What does she want here?" There was no response, which alerted Oliver more strongly. "Freeze. Let Taz explain what she wanted first." Again the fateful silence, but this time it didn't last long. Helen uttered only a few words. "Hayden Green River. And those who get in the way, she will kill." Oliver, though prepared for any outcome, he was still confused. But that didn't stop him from attacking a split second later. All to protect his prince. Now the captain could clearly see the girl's red eyes and the mad look in them. The ease with which she had repelled the attack with her staff was unexplainable. Helen oriented herself back a little, preparing to show off something from her arsenal. "Fire blast," said a soulless voice, and balls of flame appeared all around, aimed in the direction of the captain. Oliver had no margin for error, but it seemed the captain was ready. With one chopping blow, he executed the pillar of fire flying in his direction. Even the possessed Helen was put into shock. Just those few fractions of a second were enough for the captain to catch up to the archmage in a flush. First, Oliver tactfully deflected the girl's defense, barely touching her head with his sword. And then he threw himself into a new attack, a chopping blow from above. But she used a mano barrier, a spell that formed an impenetrable dome. The blade bounced off of it in a matter of moments. It seems to be the first time the captain has seen such a spell. It was easy to tell from his shocked eyes. Oliver had hoped to learn how to resist the shield in his training with Master Ian. But that's okay, he can do it to her as well. The knight can't use his mana properly since he's a half-breed who only has a heart of mana. But the mana in his blood will help him deal with Helen. The captain will show the distraught girl the full power of the half-blood in the flesh. Oliver was separated from words to action in an instant. His next swift yet powerful blow left the dark mage horrified. The mana barrier fell right before her eyes. And then came what was to be expected from a royal knight. The sword pierced the girl's body, which she immediately grabbed, feeling a hellish pain. No, Oliver wouldn't finish her off. First he has to find out who the traitor is who ordered the murder of His Highness. Helen could only pray for a quick death. Here we are at the end of part 5. Thank you for getting 1,000 likes under the last part. This time, to make sure that part 6 comes out as soon as possible, let's also get 1,000 likes. If you watch this video till the end, write the secret word in the comments. Spell. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because it's very important for me. See you soon and bye-bye.